Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk Food Safety with Tia and Jill. Welcome to
Hello,
the show.
hello, and happy Wednesday, everyone.
Happy Wednesday. And we're one day away for Thanksgiving in the States. And so
Yes,
it's a short week for the people that's in the US. Hopefully it's a short week, I
I
should say.
know, hopefully, right? That's one of the weird things about being in food. Well, in many professions,
Yeah.
right? There
Yeah.
isn't always the day off for holidays or maybe not the full day off. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But we do hope that you get a little bit of time with your family this holiday season and to also just reflect on what we're grateful for. That's something that I enjoy about this part of the year is just for me, it's a mental reminder of just to reflect on how grateful I am for what I have, in my life, and then also like just reflect on the year, right? Just coming up on the new year and like who I want to be in the next year and how I want to grow in the next year. So I love this time of the year because it puts some of that stuff into my mind, into perspectives for me. And so it's one of my favorite times of the year. And so that's just something that I like to remember and for, you all to even think about like what are you grateful for this week,
yeah,
this year.
it's kind of the season. It's the like for whatever reason, right? Sometimes we need prompts to put us into these spaces where we create the moments to have
Mhm.
this time. I know
Yeah.
that's a lot of moments and spaces, but it is holiday seasons are a time where people often pause and go, huh, what is it that I appreciate? Yes, we can be doing it all year. And yes, should
Mhm.
we? Yes, we
Yes,
should. Do
yes.
we always take the time? Not always.
Mhm.
So now we have some freedom.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Think about it. Like a lot of people say, oh, it's so cliche to do like the new goals for the new year. And it is, but it's also that just reminder for me,
yeah,
you know,
right.
that reminder.
Hey, and what prompts work for someone may not be the jam for someone else, and that's okay. I
Absolutely.
still think, you know what, if they're out there doing their goals on those days and it's helping motivate them to like be their authentic self, move to the spaces they want to be, like go for it.
Yes, absolutely. We support. And then I mean we've talked about so much on LinkedIn Live and obviously when if you all have worked with us before, we always talk about just how important it is to stop, pause, reflect
Mhm.
on what you're doing, right, and where you want to go. We build in that space in all the programs that we have because that's so important. So you're right, Jill, like whatever those triggers are, and we even talked about it last week with Susan. If you missed that one, go watch our real talk from last week because it's one of my favorite ones. But a part of her in deciding happy were what are your rituals that you're doing when you wake up in the morning,
Mhm.
so it's like it's just those reminders of, ooh, I haven't been doing my gratitude journal, I haven't been doing these things, how do I get back on track now that really here in the States we're all about gratitude and Thanksgiving, in November. It's just that
Mhm.
reminder to get back on track.
Yeah, and this is all part of Real Talk Food Safety, right? This
Mhm.
is where we're going to talk about things that impact and influence our technical leadership, food safety culture, taking care of people, being authentic to ourselves. That's why we're here. So if
Absolutely.
you're joining us live or on replay, we hope that's what you know you're getting into.
Yes, yes. And we want to know like who's here with us on this Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Put in the comments, say hello. Let us know where you are watching from or listening from. And if you're watching us on replay after the holidays, still say hello to us. Put hashtag replay so we know that you are out there.
Exactly. Yes, because we love to know. And we love having you join us because today, if you saw the title, we're talking about leadership paradox.
Yes, yes. And this one is a big topic.
We need more than one show for this.
I know, right? Because it's something that's really interesting because we're in this leadership space, and if all of us should be leaders in our organization, right? And so if we take on that role of being a leader, it really isn't easy,
Mhm.
right? It's
It's
not easy.
No, and after the show, we're going to drop a link in the show notes for this great article that recently came out that actually talked about leadership paradox.
Hmm.
And we're going to take it a little bit further, but also really more applied to kind of this space and what we're doing, because we know being a leader is not easy.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
matter how often, like I remember being like on the team and thinking, well, when I'm supervising or when I'm the manager of this group, it's going to do this, this, or this.
Yes.
Yeah, clearly that is the perspective we have before we've stepped in those shoes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we can probably even think about those times where we've heard someone, it might not even be ourselves. We've heard someone say, oh, when I get there, I'm going to do things differently. And then
Mm-hmm.
they get there, and then it's like, well, I thought you were going to do all these things so differently. And they're like, you don't know what's in this chair, right? Like, you don't know what's in this position. I have all these other things kind of going on. And just from a priority standpoint, maybe it doesn't fall in, or maybe COVID happened during the time, or right? Like, it's not
Oh,
easy with just the changing of environments, the fast pace of organizations, how innovative they want to be. They want, I mean, every year, if you're working for a for-profit company, their goal is to get profits,
mhm.
more profits every single year. And so that means those tough projects of cost savings and innovation and sales and driving out inefficiencies, like, it's only getting harder because we're tackling the low hanging fruit. It's only getting harder over time.
It is. And on top of that, right, customers want and need more. We've got social media that, right,
Ooh, yes.
that blows things up. So regardless of what you intend to be as a leader, how it's interpreted and shared across our globe and in this world looks different.
Yeah.
Um, we are at this really unique time where we have so many different generations working in the workforce,
Mhm. Mhm.
and right, we're trying to navigate all of these different needs because everybody which is all good, everybody has different needs.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. And then
leadership paradox.
yes, yes. You mentioned even like across the globe, more companies are becoming global. And so when we think about culture, that culture is very different than this culture that you had in that one facility in Tennessee.
Mm.
Versus like now you have 15 facilities across the US or 30 across the globe, right? Like, the cultures look different. And as we try to tackle culture, food safety culture, right? It's important to take in all of those needs, right? But that's hard as a leader because you're not just taking in all of those needs, you're taking in your own needs and what you need, in your role and as a person. And
Yeah,
that's just really what comes down to this leadership paradox that it talked about in the article, which I think Forbes wrote, right?
I think so.
Forbes.
Yeah. And, it's this interesting place because as humans, we all want to succeed and we don't want failure. And being a leader, being a human, we inherently have those things.
Yeah.
But yet, that's not always what we want to experience while we're leaders, or we certainly don't want to be failing in the eyes of others. And no matter how
Mhm.
often companies say, "Gosh, we embrace failure. It's learning."
Yeah.
We know there's still this stereotype and like the stigmatism around what failure means, and that judging. And so being a leader these days is harder than ever, trying to
Mhm.
navigate through all of these complexities. And plus, instead of just for us in this space, right, we were always champion for being really technical. Like, I can do the meanest risk assessment around, data driven and all of that. Well, that's fantastic, but if you're not bringing people with you and taking care of them, that's a fail these days. Or that's not a fail. Opportunity. But really, this is where we're at with this space of like not bringing people with us, and now our like culture has suffered.
Yeah, yeah. It makes us stagnant, right? Like, if we're not bringing people with us, if we're not taking care of our people, if we're not embracing and learning and developing, right, our leadership side, then we're just stagnant, which again flows into this leadership paradox of we're trying to make these changes as leaders, but we're also struggling with um, our own issues around resources and well-being, right? And the article also talks about, which we're going to get into a little bit later too, on like, it talks about how leaders are in this space because they've been leading, right? But they are contributing to the culture that they're in, right?
Yes.
But also are expected to solve it.
Yes.
And so it's one of those things that's like, ooh, like I created this culture. I'm a part of this culture, but I also need to solve the culture issues that we're having.
Yeah. And where's the great quote that says something like solving the problem has to be done with a different mindset or whatever than what we created the problem?
Yes.
I don't remember the exact quote. Somebody else out there probably does, but that's all part of this leadership paradox. And thinking on top of that, kind of circling back to my story about like, hey, when I'm the manager, I'm going to do this, right? Leading is like food safety. It's thankless.
Yeah.
It's easy for people to, kind of jump over or blame or, see faults in these spaces of what we do.
Wow.
And there's always a lot of pressure. Gallup for years has said 70% of a team's engagement is influenced by the manager.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
all of these things pile up for that extra heavy load on leaders, and that's a lot to carry.
Yeah, it's a lot. It is. It's a lot. It's a lot to be like, oh man, your team is going to leave, right? If you are not at the top of your game as a leader. But that's why leadership in making sure that you have a strong leadership development plan is so important, because it does have consequences, right? If you do not have strong leadership and if your leaders are not growing.
Exactly. And so if this is your first time joining us, then we want to let you know that's what Catalyst does.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are here to help change and transform how people lead in food.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
want people to live authentically. We want you to achieve more. And it's all about doing that to also support and enable business growth.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
know stepping into this role and being leaders, it is a heavy load. But when you are better equipped to have success, guess what? You have success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not like we have a really savvy, like, so like sales platform or anything. Like we just want to help people be better leaders by setting you up to be better leaders.
Right, exactly. And we know, because we've worked in the industry, like we know that we got a lot going on. And sometimes you just need a partner to help you stay on track, to develop the material, right? To be able to help you develop through the stages of your career. And so we help fill that gap, because it was a gap when we were directly working in industry, and it's a gap. It's a gap today.
It is. And so for those of you joining us on, I just dropped the link into LinkedIn so you can go out there and check it out. But really, that's why we're here and talking today about, like Tia said, when senior leaders hear change is needed because employees report, lack of trust in leadership, frustration with workloads, shrinking resources. We want things streamlined to make them easier.
Wow.
Senior leaders take that seriously and they're like, good, let's put a plan in place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times what we see, especially as we talk about food safety culture, we see town halls, we see focus groups, we see surveys, we see feedback loops. Like, how do we get people involved? And then, the next year when employees are surveyed and there's not a lot of improvement, senior leaders get frustrated.
Yeah.
And does that sound like food safety culture, anyone?
Raising our hands, right? Where we take surveys, or we, like you said, we do these focus groups. And I mean, it's not something that is just common to us, right? Because Forbes is literally writing about it with leaders, where we're doing these things over and over, but nothing is really changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Kevin Oakes in his culture renovation book even reports only 10%, 10-15% of culture renovations are successful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why there is a leadership paradox. We want things, as leaders, people want things to get better, but we also get stuck. And I think it's interesting to think about the versions that we can see sometimes that bubble up even in food safety.
Mm-hmm.
So it's activities, like around World Food Safety Day or Food Safety Education Month.
Yeah.
And that may increase awareness about food safety. And I think sometimes that's misinterpreted like, wow, look, we're improving culture. And it's not that we're not, but culture, we know that's the everyday thing. It's not
Yeah,
just once a week. And those are great times. And I love when I see companies highlighting the good things that they're doing.
yeah.
But it's also what are the things that we're doing on all of those other days?
Yeah, yeah. It's like those are supporting, right? Supporting programs where we're drawing awareness and we're celebrating our wins. Like those are the supporting pieces. Just like it's not terrible to do assessments, right? It's not terrible to have focus groups. It's not terrible to have to do these things. You should be doing those things. Just know that if they're not part of a bigger conversation around leaders, and how you lead in your organization, then you're missing some key pieces that actually pushes culture forward.
Yes. If you're out there, you know my pet peeve are pizza parties.
Yeah.
Or versions of that, right? Those aren't the things that are moving culture where we want them and to be sustained. And when
Right.
I say we, I mean like as an industry,
Mhm.
that's not going to drive us where we need to go.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
know I'm super excited to talk about like how leaders recognize, what they're charged with doing for changing culture. And not only like what we need others to help us with, but like what do we need to do? Because I think Tia, like you started off, we're in this. Like we've helped create
Mhm.
the culture. We've directly contributed to the culture.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for us?
Yes. Yes. And just this whole piece of, I mean, we talk to our clients about it. Like we've been there, we see it, where if we're doing these things, right, that we've been doing for many years, and we're trying to do these steps. The one that I like, you have the pizza party, that's your pet peeve. The one that kind of comes to me that's becoming a pet peeve for me is, oh, the team doesn't feel like they're getting recognized, and so we're going to recognize someone, one person out of our 30,000 employees, once a quarter at our global quality meeting. It's like, is that really moving the dial, right? Is that really what they need? Is that you recognize 4 people a year at this global setting where you have a slide up and you say, thank you, Tia, for the work that you're doing. We're recognizing what she's doing there. And that is great. Again, it's great. Don't take it away if that's what you're doing. Just make sure that's exactly what your teams mean when they say we're not getting recognized enough.
Yes.
So it's like the pizza parties are fine, right? Like I worked at organizations that they have food often, and I loved it because I could find a snack and I don't have to think about lunch, right? I love that. But if that's the only thing you're doing to try to get engagement and for culture, like again, you're missing this key component that is actually driving your culture, and that's your leaders.
Yes. And so that's our topic today.
Mhm.
So, right, we're going to share like why this happens and how, more importantly, how do we move past it?
Yes. Yes.
Because we talk to, right, we work with clients and organizations where they continuously talk about their leaders are working at layers below their level, that they're
Mhm.
leading in the same way they did before, and they're really looking for how do we shift things?
Yeah.
This is the leadership paradox. It's for us to get different results, we have to do different things. But
Mhm.
we also need to know what's leading us to be in this space where maybe we think we've made changes, but we're not getting the results that we think we should see.
Yes. Yes. So
Mhm.
let's talk about that a little bit. And we have 3 things that we're going to cover today, and for you to think about, like, where are you as a leader? Where's your team? And what are some things you can do to kind of shift away from this?
Mhm.
And the first one is that leaders need to reflect on the culture and their contribution to what it is today.
Yeah, I love this as a starting point because I think when we think about culture, I'm not sure we always put ourselves as like I'm the one responsible for the culture I see today.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We think, "Oh, it's what exists. It's what's here." It's almost like this third, you know, like, you know, like 3
Party
seats
kind of.
away from us. Yeah, third party. But really like we're the ones doing it. And, we talk quite often about we are so comfortable with traditional problem solving tools like PDCA or problem solving or five whys or even Six Sigma or some of these more robust systems. And for us to actually pause and not use a tool right away,
Right, right.
but to actually sit in this space and reflect, like
Yeah,
self awareness
yeah.
is really powerful and really hard.
Yes, yes. Because it's a look at yourself on okay, if you feel like people do not speak up at your organization, how as a leader are you contributing to that? Do you speak up when you see issues, not just issues on the floor, but other issues?
Mhm.
Right? Are you driving those conversations? Do you go to people and ask them questions? Right? Do you actually have time where you go and have conversations with people so people can tell you these things? Or do you wait for them to come to your open door in
Mhm.
your office? Right? So it's those things of how am I contributing to this culture we have today? Because most likely if I'm a leader at an organization, I'm contributing to it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think part of it is understanding, these are some of the nuances of, right, when I look back at like early days of leading, or we even hear this with clients, like 10 years ago when I led, this is what I did. And so look at what I'm doing now. Awesome.
Yes.
And it is, right? We want to grow as leaders. But the part that's also important is not only do we grow because we've learned just experientially what we've done or we've had different roles, but moving into leadership and being leaders to reflect means we have to be more intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's, I think, one thing that we hear often, that our clients and people we've worked with, we're busy, busy.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get caught up in the doing, 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 we're not leading, leading, leading.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so taking this time to reflect and really understanding how by doing that, we also don't allow other people to do that.
Right. Yes. Yes. Because we're doing, right? And it could be simple things. Like I remember
Mhm.
having a conversation with a leader and they're out on vacation checking emails. And it's like,
Yes.
well, I don't want my team to do that because I want them to disconnect and not check emails. Like that's the type of culture they want. But instead, they're telling their team through their actions, right, that I expect for you to check your email and stay caught up while you're out. And
Oh,
then,
but Tia, I just want to really be there so they know I'm supporting them.
right, yeah, you're telling them
Oh.
that they too should have their presence known, that they're here to support us when they're out on vacation.
Mhm.
So, and I remember talking with this leader, and it was just like a light bulb, like, and that makes sense, right? That makes sense that that's the message I'm sending to them, even though I'm trying to verbally tell them, no, 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 you don't have to do what I'm doing. But we all know, right? Like that's the culture you're creating, is that when you go out on vacation, you're checking emails, you expect for other people to do that.
Yeah. And I think that goes into, one of the parts of this is that we talk a lot about people's needs have changed,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Not only
Mhm.
generation, but even like our expectations.
Yeah.
So for like, I grew up in the generation where, yeah, we're supposed to be like people pleasers and like make sure we're doing everything because our jobs are so important, and not that they're not important, but
Mhm.
time away from our jobs are important.
Mhm.
There's surveys, I'd have to go grab them, but right, like some of the new generations coming in, they're like, we're not going to work while we're not supposed to be at work.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
They're totally disconnecting because their needs have changed and what they want.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this, so reflecting on culture and what people need and how we're contributing to tell people like you need to be in this other culture,
Mhm.
it's a really, really big part of this leadership paradox.
Yes, it is. And even to think about, like, we talk about new generations coming in, like, we have even contributed to that, right? Like,
Yes.
those generations coming into the workforce have seen their parents and uncles and aunts and everyone around them work, but not get rewarded for that work. Or we've been through recessions, right? We've been through COVID. What has happened with downsizing and cost cutting? Like they've seen this stuff and we've told them, right? Like, oh man, that I don't know if that was worth it. Right? I don't know if that was worth it to work all of those hours and not have anything to show for it at the end. And
Yeah.
so now they're coming in, they're like, well, I'm not going to do that. And we
Right.
wonder why, they're like that. But in reality, we have contributed to that viewpoint. And it's honestly not a bad thing. Like we talk about workload capacity and recharging because those things are necessary it was necessary in the past as well. It is definitely necessary now as we are today in our business with the people that are in our organizations, right? In the generations coming in the change in expectations for my employees.
Hmm. Yeah. And you know what I love best is like, even we just had a few, you guys will see them soon, a few new testimonials about boot camp. And what I love is when people talk about like, I thought I was doing pretty good with relationships and
Yeah.
relationship building. But because our programs are coaching based and ask questions that require people to reflect and require people to think about their contribution, it brings awareness and
Yes.
new perspectives.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that's so important, especially as we think about the second thing
Mm.
about the leadership paradox is when we haven't created space to actually create new perspectives, we solve the same problem over and over.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
why is that? Because we're solving the wrong one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like if okay, this is the data, right? This is the technical analyst in us.
Mhm,
Is that if we have a hypothesis, right? And we go through and we collect this data, aka the surveys that we do, and we do the actions and we take the survey again and it hasn't changed. That means we're not solving the right problems.
mhm,
That means that the way that we're thinking about it, the way that we're engaging, the conversations that we're having, something is missing from what we're doing to show that we're not having any type of movement when it comes to our culture.
mhm.
And so like it just makes sense even from a scientific standpoint to say like we have been talking about culture, really what Frank Giannis came out with his book in 2009. And so
But it was way before that, even like a couple decades.
exactly that we have been on this path of food safety culture and we haven't seen much change in it. And it's because the way that we're leading is the same, right? We're trying to solve problems that might be a problem for me personally as a
Mm.
leader, but not a problem that exists for your people, which is the
Oh,
culture.
yeah. Yes. And that is really powerful to stop and pause about, especially when, as technical experts, we've always been cheered on and championed for having answers.
Hmm.
Even if we engage with other people, right? Even if we talk to others, like we're still the one bringing forth solutions or insights on problems. So are we solving our problem, or as leaders, are we solving the problems that our team members or people around us need solved?
Yes.
Mm,
Yes. I think that's also tied to our first one on understanding, like reflecting on current culture and understanding how you are contributing, because it's connected in the sense of like, am I continuously putting these solutions into our culture that's not doing anything, right? Is that contributing to us doing work that's not meaningful, that's not moving the dial? Is it contributing to people being frustrated because again we're doing something else that we didn't ask for, right? But we're doing something else that leaders feel like is going to change the culture, even though, and we've heard it, right? The whispers of like, that's not going to do anything, right? Like that's not going to do anything for us. It's not going to do anything, solve the big problems that we've been talking about. Nothing. And it's because that leader hasn't really done that self-reflection, right? Haven't really picked up on that self-awareness of how are we contributing? Are we solving the wrong problem?
yeah, and I think they outline that really great in the article that we dropped in the link as well, because that the solving the wrong problem, as we all know, manifests in different ways.
Yeah.
So even as we think about we gather voices and we do something and it's not effective, like that's part because it's the wrong problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think, I don't know, I remember having conversations, even as we talk about, let's say, compliance or GFSI. And, there's always that, like, if we do the five whys or root cause, There was a conversation I remember having with people, and we're like, if we actually followed that all the way through, every single root cause would actually come back to leadership.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
At the end of the day, they all would come back to leadership.
Yeah.
Clearly, from a practical standpoint, to get things moving and fixed in your facility or in your organization, you can't have them all go back to that right away. There are different maybe degrees
Yeah.
within the solve. But I think that's where we're at with culture is that
Mhm.
we've got these fundamental dissonance that
Yeah.
happen within our organizational systems and our leadership systems that
Yeah.
we still haven't addressed.
Yeah.
As leaders, are we willing to step into that space and understand some of those system level issues, whether it's with our leadership within our systems, to really help solve this leadership paradox?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
are we just surface leveling,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like, you know me, I'm going to say, are we just going to have another pizza party?
Right. Exactly. So it's true. It's true. And sometimes you have to take a step back, right?
Yep.
Sometimes you have to even have external support to be able to say, hey, just come and look and see what we're doing because we're in it, right? Like we're in it every day and we know what we know here. And if I'm a part of the culture, but trying to solve the culture, which is what the article talks about so well, is that it's hard for me to see the forest for the trees because I'm literally in the forest, right? So it's hard for me to do it within, and sometimes you just need that outside support to be able to say like, we keep solving the wrong problems, like help us identify where should we be going next. And if you all had the opportunity to sit in on the webinar that we did with the Atchison group or tag, we talked about that. We talked about how having external support to be able to take your results, like tag has a fantastic assessment
Mhm.
for food safety culture, to take that assessment result and really be able to use the tools that we bring around food safety culture strategy to decide what direction do we need to go in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, whichever one that you're focusing on as an organization. Having that external support brings different lenses to it, right?
Mhm.
And it's people that's not already in your culture that's trying to sustain, don't have any dog in the fight around if your cases are going out today, tomorrow, none of that. We're just here to look at how's your food safety culture today and where do you want to be in the future. And
Mhm.
sometimes having that external support helps to see that.
It does because, how often as leaders do we really get into the heart and soul of people?
Mm, mhm.
Because we're so busy.
Yeah.
And when we think about this leadership paradox, even for us, right, we just talked about the first one was how do we even understand how we're contributing and take time to reflect? Because that's really getting to our own heart and soul.
Yeah.
And to do that, it takes a lot of teasing things out. Like, what are the stories that people make? What are the assumptions people make? Those things factor in. So even when we have our first conversation, the problem isn't the problem. There's something more behind the problem. It is the five whys, which
Mhm.
is why this one gets so hard because when we're solving the wrong problem, it's because we haven't dug far enough to understand what that real problem is. We
Yeah.
haven't gotten to that root cause. And
Yes.
that's heart and soul when we talk about leadership and food safety culture
And I'm
and,
gonna throw
and
in
stories that we're creating around things.
right, exactly. And everything that you're talking about, like coaching. It's the reason why we have coaching a part of our programs is because coaching is designed for you to dive deeper than the
Yeah.
surface, right? And that helps you understand number one, how are you contributing to the current culture, but it also helps you gain awareness on if you are solving the wrong problem.
Mhm. And what I love is it's layers, right? Because
Mhm.
I mean, there's questions that I'm ready for today, but that's because I've been in coaching relationships for, a long time now.
Yeah.
Like much longer than a decade. But when I first started, even, the smallest steps forward helped create and pave the way to be where I'm at today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because things like, and a good example, especially in this space that we are currently, is that there's a focus on how do we get people engaged,
Mhm.
but then there's also this like, how do we develop people?
Oh,
And
yes.
this is one that we talked about a little bit earlier, right? Like when we think about solving the wrong problem, organizations often think, wow, if I get people engaged, then that's
Yes.
going to solve all the problems. Well, we know people want career development, they
Mhm.
want growth.
Yeah.
So I can be completely engaged, but if you're not giving me growth, we're solving the wrong problem, and
Yes.
vice versa.
Yes.
And these nuances are what's so important as a leadership to tease out what's really behind the problem.
Yes. Yes. When you talk about that around like engagement is being different from development, organizations can definitely see this if they have top talent leaving, because top talent is engaged. Like, it's hard for them not to be engaged, even in things they probably shouldn't even be engaged in, right? Like, they're engaged, they're in it, they're trying to solve problems, right? That's your top talent. That's what we talk about with top talent to back away off from. But if they're leaving your organization, it's not because they're not engaged, right? They are engaged. They probably own a lot of projects in your organization. They're just not getting the development they need in order to tackle the problems they're trying to solve or in order to move in their career.
Yeah.
And so understanding that difference between engagement and development is crucial.
Or whatever those things are that sometimes all get lumped into one thing. And then that's when we start town halls and, listening forums, which
Mm-hmm.
is cool, but yet we still need to get to the bottom of what is the actual problem. And, spoiler alert, it's not the same for everybody.
Right. And
Right. For me, it might be engagement. Maybe I'm disengaged because I find this work kind of boring. You may
right.
be developing me,
Yeah.
but oh well.
Right. Because
It
I
may be
don't like.
completely different for you. You may be like, I love this work. You don't have to spend any money on developing me. I love it. I'm going to be here forever.
Yeah.
This is why getting to the heart of people, getting to their soul is so critical.
And this is why culture is hard, right?
Yeah.
There's not an easy fix. You can't do it in 6 months. You can't, like, it's hard to do. And it's a continuous thing because you're right. Each person is different. And it's important that you have a gauge on each person
Yeah.
in your organization. And it doesn't mean me, right, need to make sure I talk to all 150 employees that either report directly to me or indirectly. It means that I'm using the leaders that I have on my team to gauge, and they're using those leaders to gauge, right? And so as you look at this setup, everyone has someone, right, that they are engaging with, and like you said, really getting to the heart of each person to understand what do they want from the culture, how should we change, how should we continuously change, right, over the year to again solve the problem that exists for them, not
Mhm.
just for you as a leader.
And I think that gets to our last one about leadership. Like part of the leadership paradox is that we have to fully step into a leadership style that supports the people around us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we hedge, or we find people who hedge. We have
Mm,
clients who hedge, or we have, clients who are like, well, if I just do this one thing, it'll make it all better.
yeah.
It may have short-term improvements, but long-term, you will still have the same.
Right, exactly. It's like thinking about it as a project versus an actual leadership style change for the organization.
Yeah, because no matter how good of a human I am, and I have this belief that all humans are inherently good, we just have all these factors, environmental things that sometimes flare up
Mhm.
or that we're living in. We are all good people.
Yeah.
So if we go on this theory, like I'm a good person, I'm a good leader, like those things don't always make equal signs.
Yes. Yes.
It's being intentional as a leader and understanding your awareness and your impact on others and how to guide, inspire, and bring them with you is
Right.
what makes leaders.
Yes. Yes. This was one of the most like insightful thing about the article to me, where they talked about how, leaders are responsible for the culture that they're in, right? But they're also responsible for changing it.
Mhm.
Just that whole idea of, I am the problem, but I'm responsible for changing the problem. If I'm thinking about it as just a project, right, that's so external from me. That's like, again, you're trying to solve a problem that is not the actual problem, because the actual problem is me, the leader, right?
Yeah.
And so to think about it instead as a leadership style change, now I'm looking at myself. How am I going to lead differently than how I've been leading to change where we are? And this is one of the reasons, like even in cultural renovation, some of the things that Kevin talk about in that book are of organizations that have gone through culture change. And many times they've gotten a new CEO or new
Mhm.
C-suite or new leaders. And it's because the previous leader, whether, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they were a terrible leader, they just created the culture that was there then, that probably served them, right? Because he's talking about like big companies, billion-dollar companies. So they've obviously done something right, but it's time to change the way that they lead in the space. And so a lot of times organizations look at new leadership, but you don't necessarily have to look at new leadership
Yeah.
when it comes to it, right? Like that's just a way of doing it.
Mhm.
Another way is really just to look at yourself and the leaders that you have and really reflect, again going back to that first one, reflecting and understanding your contribution to the culture you have today and how you're going to make that leadership shift as you want your culture to shift.
Yeah, and I think that's once again leadership paradox, because what happens is, right, we get tasked, go improve food safety culture, which, right, we all know is part of culture in general,
Mhm.
but go take care of that. And then it becomes a checklist of
Yeah,
things that we're doing versus, okay, how do I need to shift my leadership style to support the culture I want to see?
yeah,
How do I need to bring everybody along with me?
yes,
You can't just add food safety culture to a job description or it's our 5-year plan and then it's all good. I think we logically understand that, but what we see as we've worked with clients is, right, that mindset shift that it takes to really have people go, okay.
right, yeah.
Now I understand how it looks different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes. And this is one thing I didn't think about as we were preparing for the show is that many of you have probably seen our leadership mindset. If you haven't, let us know. We're happy to send it to you. But the way that we separate out leadership mindset, we talk about like, how do we see ourselves?
Mhm.
How do we see others? And then how do we see each other? So, like, even as we think about these three of like, leaders need to reflect on their contributions to culture, right? Like, that's how you see yourself becoming
Mhm.
more aware. That's where you start. And then how do I see others is that, am I solving the wrong problem, right? Like, am I
Mhm.
actually seeing others and what they need to solve? And then the third one is all about like, how do we see each other? And that's bringing others with you. That's understanding how we work together. That's understanding that leadership style that you need to have for your people so that you can work together. And I know we didn't plan that, but
Yeah,
like
look at you pulling that all together for
no,
us.
I was just here thinking about it.
Hey.
I'm like, this is exactly what we've been talking about because and it's so important for people to even think about it in that way of like I have to start first with myself and be clear about who I am and how I'm contributing and how I want to contribute in the future. And then I got to get to the point that I'm bringing others with me.
Mhm.
Because if I'm only looking at myself and what's best for myself, again, we're just going to be solving the wrong problems and you're going to see the same issues over and over come up, even though you feel like you're doing work.
Yeah, or even if people might say, we all have done root cause analysis in 5 whys, and so we certainly know what it's like when you get to something. You're like, oh yeah, that could be the problem, but it's a surface level problem,
Yeah.
right? And so we know that it takes more to get under there, and that leadership style change. I love how you mentioned, Tia, that it's right. We see organizations that right they clean house and then bring new people in.
Mhm.
Once again, not always the right way to do things because within our cultures, there's a lot of stuff that works really well. And I think part of it then is understanding with food safety, this how it weaves in with just general culture, safety culture. There's all these aspects, but I think the part that I always want to make sure people Well, I just want to share my perspective because food safety culture, right? We all know it's a subset. And if we don't have somebody over here championing with the passion that we have for food safety, we know what happens because we're living it right now. It
Mhm.
doesn't make it to the table,
Right.
not to the way that we need it. And that's why, really, as food safety leaders, we've got to step into this space where we are like hand in hand with HR and culture, hand in hand with our upper leaders and the leaders that are, like horizontal and below. But it
Right.
takes us and our voice to champion the change we need to see. Other
Right.
people are just going to have a light bulb go off and go, wow, that food safety leader over there, man, they really like, now I get it.
Right. Not gonna happen anytime soon, most likely.
No, I mean, but you're doing the work and all of it is planting seeds, which is fantastic. But this is part of that leadership style change. Like, how do you do it to be more effective? How do you do it to be more influential? How do you do it to really drive different results than you're getting today?
Mhm.
That's what
Yeah.
everybody wants to know. And that's why we do this, because that's what we help do.
Yeah, absolutely. So like as we talked about this today, right? Like number one, leaders need to reflect on the culture and their contributions to what it is today. Two, leaders are solving the wrong problem, right? You really need to focus on what is the problem that exists for your people.
Mhm.
And then three, thinking about it not as a project, but as a leadership style change.
Yes.
Those are our three. And you might be thinking, whew, yes, I agree with you, but I have a million things on my plate. Where am I going to find time to do this? And I would say you got to start at the beginning,
Mhm.
right? You have to understand and get your workload right. You have to understand where's everyone else's workload. What should people be doing at the levels that they're at? Some of those things that we talk to with clients, especially some of our clients that's in boot camp, that's trying to figure out like my workload, how do I have these conversations, right? Like they're trying to figure out how do I work at my level, right? And how
Yeah.
do I get others to work at their levels, right?
Yeah.
Like
I call it cleaning up my yard. I got to clean up my yard.
yeah, clean up my yard before I start trying to clean up someone else's, right? Like if you don't have a good sense of that, or or if your yard is not clear, right, or not clean, then like all the other stuff around culture, it's going to be very hard to do because if you are, say that you're supposed to be the strategy, you know, mindset behind food safety and food safety culture. Well, if you are doing tactical work on the line, then you really don't have time to strategize. And so
Mhm.
no one's basically doing that work. And
Yeah.
so that first step, and we talk to clients about this a lot and help them, is that how do we get you to a place that you have the right amount of resources and you have the right people doing the right work?
Mhm.
Now let's talk about how do we advance. Because if you're trying to skip steps, and maybe I think that kind of falls into leaders are solving the wrong problem. Sometimes we just skip steps because we're trying to be at the end and we don't want to talk about food safety culture. We just want to be like, yep, check, 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 check. We've
Well,
done
the bright, shiny thing isn't always the thing that's in front of us,
it. Right. Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And the discipline that it takes. But this is part of being an intentional leader.
Mm,
It's
mm.
understanding that the bright, shiny, sparkly thing will be there,
Yeah.
but we need to mow the grass first. We need to get the weeds out before we can start putting in the new flower gardens,
Right. Yes.
right?
Yeah. Oh, I like this garden investment because it's so true. Like I'm just thinking about my flower bed right now. It's like terrible. It's terrible. If you are in the Baltimore area and have a green thumb and enjoy cleaning out flower beds, mine. I need your help. But like, imagine if I was going to plant flowers on top of already a mess,
Yeah.
right? Like yeah, we might have some bright spots in there, right, to celebrate. But is that really the culture that we want? Is that really the culture we're trying to be? Is that really the flower bed that I
Those
need?
flowers aren't going to thrive for very long.
Exactly.
They need
Exactly.
space. They need nurturing. They need sunlight. They need all those things. So,
Exactly. And we know weeds, right? Weeds take over. So if you haven't pulled out those weeds, if you haven't pulled out those problems and solved those problems, they'll just come back.
yeah.
They'll just come back.
And that's the leadership paradox,
Yeah, yeah. So read
right?
the article. Jill, thank you for posting it on our LinkedIn. Read that article. Let us know what you think about it. Like, what
Mhm.
did you get out of out of the article? What did we miss? What should we add to the list? Because it was a very insightful article to read, and one that I think we don't have enough conversations about. Maybe we do at Catalyst because this is what we do. This is what we're passionate about. But
Yeah.
just as an industry, how do we have more conversations about how are we supporting our leaders to tackle this huge, you know, task or situation of culture?
Mhm. Exactly, because we have to be willing to do it different, and we are.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's just stepping into that. So,
Yes. Yeah,
well, our hour always goes so quickly.
it does.
And we know these paradoxes exist,
Mhm.
but of course, you're not alone. If you're
Not.
sitting out there going, "Yep, I've experienced some of that," or I know people who have, right? You're not alone. So, right, link in with us, follow us, because this is what our community talks about. This is what we do because we're here about setting people up for success and making life easier.
Mhm.
Join us.
Yes, yes. And we love to hear your thoughts and comments. So please make sure you comment and engage with us because this is how we learn, right? From you. But then also we hope that you have some takeaways.
Yes. Well, and of course, next week we're going to be back here, same time, same day, Wednesday at noon Eastern. And we have Stephanie Wienen from Recall InfoLink joining us. Oh,
Yes.
it's almost an extension of what we've talked about today because, right, to effectively manage and run recalls and be prepared for them requires really strong leadership. Because
Yes.
how many people put recalls preparation on the back burner because it will never happen to us?
Yeah, yeah. It would never
Mm,
happen until it happens. And we don't have the process or the leadership to get it done. So I'm excited about that conversation next week.
yeah, it's going to be awesome. So,
For the people that are celebrating Thanksgiving, have a very happy Thanksgiving tomorrow. We hope that you enjoy your weekend and spend lots of time with family and friends, or by yourself if that's what makes you happy. Right? I'm just thinking
absolutely.
I need some alone time too. Whatever fills your cup, we hope that you get that this upcoming weekend.
Absolutely. So thanks for joining us and make it a great week.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.